Roll call.
Mayor Surtee,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Here.
Councilmember Barker,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Present.
Councilmember Schroeder,
Here.
Councilmember Struble.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Presentation and discussion on the extinguishment of a 33-foot road federally patented easement on Solana Road. Raquel?
Mayor, is your mic on?
It is now.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Raquel Schatz with the Public Works Department, here to discuss Resolution 1926, a roadway extinguishment easement of Solana Road from 16th Avenue to 15th Avenue. Quick background, these federal patent easements, we refer them to FPEs, were given to the city as part of a Bureau of Land Management back in 1938. These are either 5 acres or 2.5 acre parcels with the reservation of right-of-way of a 33-foot width along the boundaries of the parcel or parcels. So the reservation of the right-of-way along the boundaries of the land ensured that no individual parcel would be landlocked. This is something that we take into consideration when we do get these extinguishment applications. And then the city considers the FPEs to the same restrictions as other types of right-of-ways in which no permanent structures may be constructed within the FPEs. So here we go. We've got a map here showing Solana, 16th to 15th Avenue. There's currently not a paved road there, so it's just a dirt road that sometimes people uses for access to their parcels. To the right, you see the colored area there where you see all those reds. Those are already extinguished abandonments, easements. The yellow is the easement in question, and all those greens are dedicated right-of-way. So the reason for this application was that the owner would like to install an exterior deck to the outside of their existing parcel. This is to enhance accessibility for handicap purposes. So when they did submit a permit to building, I guess that it was determined that their improvements would be 3 feet 9 inches into the federal patent easement. So extinguishing this easement would help alleviate any of those encroachments so that they can build this. The permit is currently on hold right now.
Okay.
So, any questions?
I just have one quick one. So did we ask or did not ask for either on 15th or 14th to be dedicated?
No, when we do these extinguishments, that's something that we can't do. We can't swap land.
So we can't make it a requirement?
Correct. Only like
Okay.
there's like a rezoning, and that's something that when they go to like development services, that's something that they can require when they do a rezoning of any types of
Okay.
parcels. But with these extinguishments, we simply can't do that.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
What consent agenda is this going to be on?
Oh, this will be on consent agenda on December 3rd.
December 3rd.
Correct.
It says November, so
Oh, yeah, that was.
I was looking at tomorrow thinking maybe, yeah, okay,
Gotcha.
thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Presentation and discussion on amendments to the Brightview Landscape Services contract. Liz.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Surtee, members of council. Just going to bring this up in case, oops. I think it's this one I want. Okay. So I was at your last work session to discuss this contract. As we discussed, our current landscape maintenance services are done through Brightview, and that is up for annual renewal. They maintain the landscaped areas that are primarily in public right-of-ways and non-city parks or facility areas. Due to the increase to minimum wage requirement, also increased maintenance to areas like the Royal Palm trees that we've added, and then the upcoming Apache Trail areas. We took a look at the contract that we have currently, additionally clarifying some of the language or clarifying some of the expectations of those landscaped areas. We feel that, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, that for this work to be done, that a 10% increase in the base bid price was a fair price. We did look at other potential contracts. We went out and looked at the Mojave State contract for these similar services, and we learned that we would be paying about 400% more than what we're paying now had we gone with that state contract. So we feel very confident that this is still a good price for our annual renewal. What I would like to say, though, is that if we do determine that we don't want to keep increasing the price in that we would be going out for a rebid, most likely this summer, if we felt in any way that this wasn't going to be the right price to get us through the rest of the contracts. I just want to make sure that that's clear, so you're not surprised if you see me come summer. This is so that we can renew for this year's contract at just a 10% increase. The amendment that we worked on with Joel Stern just indicates that it's for the base price alone, and then it clarified a couple of other language items. And so with that, I'm just going to open it up to questions.
Again, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you gave us a lot of detail in the first discussion, but Gail, did you have one?
Yeah, do we, because several of these are subdivisions with HOAs that we take, do we notify the HOA just to let them know how much their landscaping we're paying for?
So they wouldn't know any other way than the rest of the public of the actual price, because that's our portion of it. All those HOAs, they maintain most of their landscape areas. We only have 2 subdivisions that back when the city was first started, or I'm sorry, not when the city first started, but when developments were first coming in, we had taken over some recreational use areas, and those were trails and a couple of other open space areas. So no, they don't necessarily know the price of it, but we do meet with them on, periodically to discuss how it's going. And that's the extent of that.
I think just because when you live in an HOA and you anticipate a certain appearance, knowing that they are paying for some of it, but they don't pay for the whole thing.
Right.
So I think it's just a good information thing to let them know.
Yeah, and we've attended the last 2 HOA meetings for one of the subdivisions, and so that's a great point that we can consider.
Okay.
And this will be on your consent agenda tomorrow night, the actual award of the contract, or the award of the amendment to the contract. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion on proposed amendments to Apache Junction City Code, Volume 1, Chapter 9, Health and Sanitation, Collection of Waste. Matt Busby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. As shown in your attached memo on the agenda, back on November 4th, we introduced the proposed language for the adjustments or the changes to the ordinance. We incorporated your feedback in the current attached version. We noticed on the attachment on the agenda, some of the red highlights didn't show up, so we have that before you this evening. So just to be sure you understand everything that we included from your feedback. So you can see the first one, there's a corrected reference in jurisdiction. They didn't show up. Yeah, it didn't show it. Yeah, we noticed that this afternoon. But here before you, and in the memo, we did detail all the changes that were, but we thought the red line was in there, but it wasn't. So the first change provided by your feedback was this changed in covered residences. We added livestock definitions as well as manure and household pets. And lastly, in definitions, some clarification in the definition of recyclable materials. Are there any questions? Oh, and we did delete the references to rubbish as requested, since, as I recall, the City Council felt that was synonymous with garbage, so why have the reference in there? Are there any further questions on these changes or definitions in general?
Matt, I do have a question that just kind of on household pets, I was going to say, anyway, there are household pets, large dogs that weigh more than 75 pounds. So I'm just not sure where why we have to put a weight limit on the household pets.
Councilmember Struble, Mayor and City Council members, this is Anna, Assistant to the City Manager. We took the definition based off the Arizona Administrative Code that has the weight limit. We thought that was a good kind of starting point with that. So the weight limit was 75 pounds, weighing less than or over in excess of. So that's why the 75-pound reference is in both those livestock definitions.
Yeah, the livestock I can see, but in household pet, it really doesn't make a difference. I don't think anybody's going to make a big deal about it. But like I say, I had a Newfoundland once that weighed 160 pounds, and there are other large breed dogs. I just want to make sure we're covered.
And in our, if this situation ever came out where we had to seek compliance in some situation based on someone reporting someone throwing waste from an animal larger than 75 pounds, if it's a dog, I don't think we're going to be going in weighing the dog with scales or anything. So, but it is certainly the council's decision whether or not they want to have the 70 pounds in the definition. It came up last meeting, and we just added it in for you.
They're probably not going to be analyzing the feces either.
We will not.
Let's hope not, yeah.
I just cautioned in the aspect is I'm going to say, if someone had a 150-pound dog and they were throwing it away, and then the neighbor complained again because we didn't do anything, how would we be forced into doing something? Whether we want to or not, because of the wording here, would we be forced?
Are you referring to the waste of the animal or the animal itself?
Well, it'd be the waste, I would assume, would be the complaint, but the household pets is the definition that we're looking at. And, I just don't want to box us into a corner where now we're having to do something even though we didn't mean to.
Right.
So we could just take the weight,
Yeah.
the 75-pound weight out of there.
Yep.
Yeah, I would not have a problem with that at all. In fact, I encourage that. Because that was one of my comments.
Are there any other on the council that has an opinion about that, or shall we make that change? All right. In your next draft, that'll be eliminated.
I just don't want to be forced into a situation where we're trying to do something because someone is complaining and they're saying, well, you're not doing anything because it says here.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Moving on, as you see in the memo, we made some small changes to this section of vehicle and collection equipment maintenance. We clarified this definition here and eliminated part of that to make it a little more clear, and then added this federal and state regulations, since there are some federal regulations that give guidelines here. Any questions with that change? Moving on to section 9-5-8. This again is related to those definitions that we added, and add some clarification here as the feedback received from City Council at the last meeting. Any concerns or comments? All right. And lastly, the other change that was made was in, still in 9-5-8. There are also these clarifications made. You asked us to line out the following are unacceptable materials. And we just made it more of an inclusive of what is included in items not accepted for collection. Moving on, this, as I recall, was just more of a technical change, just of how we wrote the title and eliminated some language there for the responsible parties' obligations or responsibilities. And lastly, some big changes in the, well, not big changes, but just numerous ones for the hazardous waste. And I don't know if you all got a chance to read through this before, but we're available for any questions if you have any. It's really clarifying where, if citizens have questions in these different areas, where they can get assistance and who they can call at the city if they have questions, or with the contractor.
Yeah.
The highlighting is great, but in the future, just to ensure if it doesn't work, maybe make it bold, so that if it doesn't come through in red, at least it's bold in black.
When we first made the changes, we did email it with this version out, but whatever translated in the agenda material, it didn't come through. So yeah, that's we can consider bolding it as well, just to make sure it translates, you can see it. Are there any other questions on the ordinance? There's one more change, and this was brought up by a resident, just clarifying that solid waste couldn't be picked up any less than once per week or more than twice per week, and we brought recycling into a new section because that would only be ever collected once a week.
Once a week, yeah.
Honor, are there any further ones?
We did make a couple clarifying changes in section 9514, the receptacle standards for placement, removal, and storage. We made a separate, under B1, a separate C, just stating that receptacles may not be placed on sidewalks. It was kind of a run-on sentence with section B, and it was a little bit confusing. We also did state that obviously receptacles can be placed in the public right-of-way given the parameters of 6 inches from the side of the street on collection days, because that was kind of contradictory. Well, if they can't be in the public right-of-way at any time, then can they ever be in the street to be collected? So we did change that language. And then in section B13, you will see that we do have some alternative language there for larger acre lots. For the storage and receptacles. So if you have any input on that or feedback on that.
I have one. We have several lots out there in the large, what I call the large area, large lot area. They are not acre and a quarter. They're approximately an acre or just under an acre in an aspect. And of course, we dealt with one over here a few years ago where the individual bought the property thinking that it was, well, it was advertised as being horse property, but to come to find out, she was at just under an acre because previous owner had given, 4 or 5 foot of the property line because the neighbor built their house too close to the property line. So they made an agreement at that time to purchase this portion of the property, which made this property now less than acre and a quarter. And we had to do a conditional use permit to allow her to have horses on the property. And I know of several properties that are, right at an acre or slightly under an acre. So I don't know how to word it, but I don't want to, to have it worded that only acre and a quarter lots that we're addressing.
So one consideration, we could just eliminate the side and say in lots where the option isn't, you can't place it in the backyard, or there isn't a backyard, or there's not natural landscaping, we could put it more of an or. If they can't put it there, they have this option.
Or could we do it by zoning?
That's a good question. Larry, do you think we could do it according to the zoning of the property? I think, yeah, we're remembering that's where the acre and a quarter came in, but Larry may be able to clarify.
That would probably cover 99%, but we also have some RSGR where the lots are like 20,000 square feet. There's some lots out there that happen to be zoned RSGR where before the city was a city, they carved an acre and a quarter into 3 lots. And so they're out there too, but in that case, it seems like they ought to be able to, it's almost like more conventional, that they ought to be able to find a hiding spot, so to speak. So We also used, in zoning, we use gross acres to clarify the FPE issue, because a lot of lots now don't have net 1.25, but we always consider it 1.25 gross. But I don't know, it's like you write an exception for a dozen lots. I don't know how, if you make it a complete exemption, just if they can't find a place for it, then they have to try to hide it. So I don't, this was an attempt to deal with the larger lots as you were in that area.
Can't that all be subsumed into number 3 so that we say they could be placed in a garage or in a backyard, behind a fence, natural landscaping, decorative walls, and go from there? Can it all be just in that one paragraph so that people have the choice of where they're going to put their cans?
Regardless of lot size or
Regardless
zoning.
of lot
Yeah,
size.
so we'll have some,
Even small lots may not have a way to do that.
yeah. So we'll eliminate the
That way,
size and then work on
anybody
this definition.
will be
Yeah.
able to make a decision as long as their can isn't visible. I'm going to put mine in a paper bag, a large paper bag.
Very good. So we'll work on that language and email a new draft out before your next meeting on this matter.
Just so I understand, when it's trash day, they're not getting pushed out on the edge of the sidewalk by the street. They're actually getting placed in the street, in the roadway?
Mine is.
Yes, there's
Always
six,
has been.
there's, that's why we have the guidelines in here for 6 inches from the side of the street, whether that's a sidewalk, a dirt, right away, right there. You don't want to obstruct pedestrians, vehicles, all that, and in the sidewalk, that could very well do that. So that's why the receptacles themselves go on the street, and we put 6 inches from the side of the street as a guideline for our residents. Because we don't want them 3 feet into the street. Obviously that's a safety hazard to traffic, bicyclists.
I think our current code is that same language.
Mm-hmm.
It just,
Yeah,
It's
well,
on
it's hard
the
to
road.
enforce, but
down
yeah.
on the street.
Yeah,
Put mine on the edge and the machine picks it up.
right.
Put
I have
it
a
in the
drive-
street,
I
right?
have a driveway, not a sidewalk, though. Over in the Royal Palm area, there's no
There's no such,
sidewalks.
right.
Yeah, we don't have any either.
The reason I ask is we live on a dirt road, so it's not an issue, but it just seems that being in the road would be obstruction to, I can see not from pedestrians, but we don't think the sidewalk's wide enough for pedestrians and a can.
Correct.
I could see a windy day where they're just going all over
And they
the
do.
road.
Yeah.
I've fetched mine from 3 houses down, yes.
In my neighborhood, I've noticed it's been 50-50 for 18 years.
And so
And the
it-
code has always been to get it in the street.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, just wanted to
Some people put it on the sidewalk and I'm,
understand.
Yeah, garbage can chasing is a sport in my neighborhood.
Okey doke.
Matt, for that language, can we pre-work that as much as we can?
Yeah.
And letting council review that as quick as we can
We will.
for that paragraph.
Then lastly, there were some items brought up in the enforcement and penalties section. I believe it was Councilmember Barker and a couple others that brought some of these up. So we tried to add some clarification here to some of those concerns expressed. Were there any questions on some of the changes? Did this meet the expectations of the council?
I'm satisfied with it, thank you.
Job, Joel.
And that is the last section of the proposed language for the ordinance.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
anyone else on that? So we'll move on to the presentation and discussion on the contract for PW 2019-41 solid waste. Back to Matt again.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's been about a month since you saw the contract before you. At the last meeting, you did give some feedback, and we added, as you see in the red line, I believe these did show up correctly. We highlighted them here. And let's see, there's one other spot, right, Anna? or was there? So we changed the shall to may at your request, and then we added or decrease. Increase or decrease was another addition. And then there was a cap. In speaking with Republic, they were comfortable with a cap at 5%. And these were the only changes requested from the council at the last meeting. Representatives from Republic Services are here if there's any questions about the contract or anything else regarding these changes. And of course, city staff are available for questions as well.
Matt, I do have a question about notice of the rate change. You know, it says effective of the anniversary date. Is there any, I don't see any language or anything about how soon prior to the anniversary date that those numbers or requests would come to the council?
Do you remember the exact section? Is it in that adjustment section, or is it?
I don't see it. You know, like that they have to come to us 2 months before the anniversary date, or a 1 month. I don't see anything in there. I just don't want them come. I don't want it to come to us a week before the anniversary date.
So Anna's reminded that we talked about a 2 months, but it's not. The language is not in the contract right now.
Is that something we need in there, or is that just something we can do as?
We do have Republic here. We do have representatives from Republic here that could help us.
Yeah, so Stephen Herring will come up from Republic and give their opinion on that.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Good evening, Mayor and Council. In respect to the adjustments, that index is typically published on an annual basis near the end of the year. So as soon as that index is published, we'd be happy to come before council and explain. Definitely 60 days before there would be any increase to the residence bill, we would come and talk to you.
Okay, because it looks like we probably won't get something like this implemented until March, probably. So if the rate would, if the index comes out at the end of the year, that would give us the 3 months. So that would work out well.
And hearing from that, Republic stated publicly that at least 60 days. I think as city staff, we'd feel comfortable with that. If city council also feels comfortable with that.
Okay.
That's up to the city council, of course.
I have a question of Stephen.
We could add language too, if that's what the council wishes.
I have a question of Stephen. This was brought to me by a resident.
Mm-hmm.
If a resident owns 2 lots, has a dwelling on both, but only lives in one, and the other is storage or what have you, do they have to have service in both lots?
Thank you for your question. It is the expectation that 100% participation for this contract. So in that instance, yes, they would have two accounts for trash service.
Okay, that's what I told her.
Yeah.
Krista?
Excuse me. So another question that came up, in order to get the 100%, excuse me, participation, compliance, whatnot, why can residents not have a permit that would be the same price as having service, have the pickup service, but to a monthly permit to go take their own trash? That way they feel like they have a choice of either taking their own, like a lot of people have been doing, mm-hmm. or having this service here. What would be the difference if, I mean, why would we not be able to do that? It's still 100%.
Yeah.
It's still, you still got them paying in, they're still paying their fair share.
Mm-hmm.
You just give them a monthly thing to haul it to the dump for the same price instead of, some people really have a problem with not having choice, and that may help alleviate some of that.
Mm-hmm. When staff addressed this question previously, it was our feeling that because we didn't address that in the RFP, and the respondents, including the other 2 providers, that wasn't part of their calculations. We felt that it went against that RFP language, but I don't know if Joel can comment on that type of change, if that's doable or not, but.
Well, Mayor, Member of City Council, I think it wasn't in the RFP, and I think the other companies would say, well, if had that been in the RFP, then we would have had a different bid. So I think it's a little late to add that to this contract.
There's also some concerns logistically that Anna could share.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Rizzi, Mayor and council members. I would just question the logistics of that. So you're talking about residents paying the same rate as the low monthly rate for curbside pickup.
For the same size
That
and
comes
weight of
twice a week.
96, whatever.
So you would
gallon.
basically be proposing to charge them the same $10.71 a month where they would self-haul once a week? So who would be responsible, I guess, for the issuing of those permits, making sure that those people do actually self-haul properly and safely to a landfill? And would it be to Republic's landfill? Because right now, they have I think it's the $8 local rate for the self-hauling right now. So if they would only do that once a month versus the $10.71, then they're actually paying more anyway, and then they could just come to their curb and pick up where they don't have to self-haul, plus they get the twice a week pickup versus them having to do it themselves.
You
So-
talk way too.
Sorry.
Okay, so for $8, tell me what I get for $8.
That's a vehicle load, I believe, up to 600 pounds.
It's $10 now, isn't it?
It's after tax, it's $10.
It's 10.
Yeah.
Per load.
So it's to take a load at
It's
the
10
limit.
So per load,
It's
not
essentially
month.
per vehicle, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if somebody hauled themselves once a week, that would be $40 for them to do that, whereas a month. Whereas if they just put their trash cans out, it would cost them $10 a month. That seems a little bit odd. That
Well-
they would want to spend the extra $30.
Well, that was the point, was why can't they get something that says I can bring it myself for that price? The only difference would be they're taking it themselves.
Well, I think one of the things that we got here to begin with was people weren't doing that.
Right.
They were storing it up in their yards, creating nuisances for their neighbors, and some people were dumping it in the wash. You know, so this has to be, everything's painful to start.
Yeah.
Change is
Change
But
is
this
tough.
isn't gonna stop any of that. People who dump in the wash, this is not gonna stop, unfortunately, and people that pile it in their yard, this is not gonna force any of those people
We do-
to comply. It's
And
not.
I disagree with that, because now we do have the codes down and enforceable, where they're not gonna like it, but they're gonna have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And, you know, do we wanna change the reputation that we've had for how many years?
But this doesn't solve that problem.
Well, not one thing solves the entire problem.
But we have, my
But we
point
have to
is,
start someplace, and it's cheaper if you just put your trash out, whether, you don't have a choice in most cities.
yeah, we know that.
For any
Preaching to the
utility.
choir, but what I'm saying is,
Absolutely.
that dumping in the desert and piling trash in your yard are two separate issues, and forcing people to have a trash can isn't gonna solve that. People that do that, there's a different cause, and it isn't necessarily, because people that have trash cans in their front yard do just that. They still dump in the desert and they still pile trash. This isn't
I
gonna solve
Your
that.
Honor.
disagree with that.
That's a separate issue.
One of the couple things to think about was that we have the RFP process. We could stay close to that. I think that's important. One of the things also about having the citizens have the ability to go is, I kind of see this as an and discussion. You'll still have the ability to take your
Sure.
haul.
You can take it
Yeah,
if
we'll
you
still
want
have
to.
self-hauling all you want at a great reasonable price for the citizens of Apache Junction. And this ability to have what I call the bid opportunity bid
absolutely.
pricings.
And if I may add to that as well, the free bulk pickup monthly, that helps a lot with the ability of having large items to put out to the curb. And then, as Bryant kind of alluded to as well, free dump days are still there quarterly. It's not going anywhere, so If anybody has full truckloads or trailers of material and they want to bring it in, great.
No, it's gotta be a truckload. Speak from experience.
One truckload, excuse me.
Yes, I can speak from experience on that one.
Your Honor.
I got
sorry.
one question in the aspect on it is, and I was talking to an individual that they live, well, there's 3 families, 3 different homes, and they're all, fairly close to one another in the aspect on it. They have a dumpster. One of them is a contractor and periodically will come home with material that he wants to dispose of. They don't have a business location. It's it basically works out of his house in the aspect on it. And they have a dumpster in the aspect on it. And it's a 2-yard dumpster. And they want to continue on, with this. And they are family. Yes, it's parents in the back. His son is up front, and daughter is just to the east of him. And now they have their own families in each one of them. And they would like to continue on this type of service. Is this something that can be done? Because they have the dumpster and be paying the dumpster pickup fees.
Is it 1 address or 3 addresses?
It's 3 addresses.
Vice Mayor, thank you for the question. Mayor and City Council members, under the premise of the contract, each of those, and I'm assuming they're single-family homes you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, each single-family home would have an account and pay the $10.71 per month. If they needed additional services beyond that, they could request those through Republic Services. And from what I understand, Republic Services will work with them on those additional services they need. But again, we're talking about the assumption of the 100% participation by residents to get that low price. So each of those single-family residences would be required to pay the $10.71 a month. Now, we have talked about those other instances in which 4plexes, triplexes, could they get a dumpster in lieu of those individual receptacles? And we did talk through some of that, and Republic Services is willing to work with them on that. But the dumpsters, I don't think we want to see our residential streets of single-family homes lined with dumpsters. And again, if we start making exceptions for one, where are we gonna draw the line? So just keep that in mind.
And to interject on that point too, for 3 single-family units at $10.71, it's most likely less than what they're paying for the 2-yard dumpster.
Yeah.
I know our market rate is around like the $50 range per month.
Yeah.
So,
But that would mean that he would want the dumpster, so he'd have the dumpster at one home, and then the other 2 would have the
yeah.
the 1071.
As Anna mentioned, we
Or
will make.
or is he going to have the 1071 plus the dumpster?
That would be up to him.
It would be up to him, but if he had the 1071, would he still need a dumpster on top of that? I mean, you're talking about sharing a dumpster, 2-yard dumpster between 3 families. If they now each have 96-yard containers picked up twice a week, maybe he might not still need a dumpster, But Republic will work with them on those circumstances. But as under the contract is written right now and the RFP is that each residential unit would be paying the 1071.
I can see a problem with that one.
I have another question now.
Robert actually had one before you.
So 1071 is pretty low rate. I mean, I would say it's probably one of your lowest.
Yes, sir.
So as before this contract, how long have you have serviced some of the customers that you already have in Apache Junction? Would you say a decade?
Yeah, so we've actually been in the market of Apache Junction for about 20 years. And granted, that's been through different acquisitions and different companies, but overall in the umbrella and portfolio of Republic Services, we've been out here for about 20 years.
How many times would you say your prices have decreased?
So the consumer price index has gone negative before, but in most instances, our rates do increase on an annual basis to reflect changes in business costs.
Okay.
Just something that came up in regards to dumpsters. And I can't remember reading about so people can choose either the tote or the dumpster, correct? For the single family, or that has to be a larger residence?
No, the single-family homes would be the 1071 per month. They'd get the 96-gallon container that would be picked up twice a week. We had talked about, in some circumstances, we'd got a few emails, which we shared with you, in which a property owner owned a fourplex or two fourplexes next to each other, and instead of having 8 individual containers out for solid waste and recycling for the fourplex, they wanted to see if they could get a dumpster for their tenants to share. And that's how some of them operate now. So we talked with Republic. That pricing was in the RFP and part of the contract. So yes, they would be allowed to, and that would cut down on those individual totes and those multifamily units.
But it has to be a multifamily unit, not a large lot.
That's where we've kind of determined right now. Otherwise, you're going to see your residential streets lined with dumpsters, and I think that kind of negates some of the property maintenance standards we've worked on in the last few years. But that's, again, your policy discussion to have.
Anyone else? Bryant, for the folks that are going to watch this online, when will we discuss this next, and will there be a public, when will that be? Just so
Mayor
that
and Council,
they know.
yeah, so thank you. We've probably done 2 or 3 public meetings like this for both the ordinance and the contract, if not more. Plus, we had the open house recently. We're proposing at staff to bring for the ordinance and the contract to your review in a public hearing in 2 weeks, or 2 weeks from tomorrow,
So in
December 3rd.
2 weeks, this will be a public hearing. Folks will have a chance to talk here at the council meeting, because I know they've been here before and been disappointed, so wanted to be no confusion on that.
That's right, that is correct.
Okay.
And they can also talk at the call to the public tomorrow night as well.
Yes, and at any time, we have call to the public, and
Yes.
And on December 3rd, you'll have the option to adopt that night too, if you choose to. It'll be our recommendation that you do.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Yes.
This is more for Brian, Joel. We have contract employees through the city, correct? So essentially, they are in contract with the taxpayers of Apache Junction to do their job. I'm just curious. I mean, this is nothing to do with anything that's going on here, but I'm just curious how comfortable would, like, let's say our manager or lawyer be, come review their contract, and we put in there, your salary may decrease annually no more than 5% based on the CPI. I mean, would you sign that contract?
That's a great question.
Well, salary, would be their proposal, though.
This is what we've negotiated with them, recognizing that the cap is at 5%.
Well, in essence, you'd be negotiating your contract with the residents of Apache Junction.
Right, and that could be a contract term that would be negotiated, that if the CPI went down, your contract employee's salary could go down, or some other portion of it.
That's what I mean, if it was in your contract, would you say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that?
Well, I've negotiated in my contract that we would do the same as other city employees, and we've never done that, never decreased employee salaries.
We saw a precedent not long ago.
Yes.
The,
City manager did that.
no, I was gonna go a different direction with the utility. The little sewer system that they have in Gold Canyon, I believe after President Trump's initial tax cuts, their costs went way down, and they actually passed that on to the consumers out there. Their sewer rates all went down a few years ago, so.
And I
So-
think, and I recall a former city manager, he did negotiate for a couple of years, 10,000
Yeah.
reduction.
Yeah.
But this is something that, the increases and decreases isn't something that the city's initiating. It's something that they have the ability to initiate. They would come to us and say, there's, we need an increase and here's why, and argue it out, or they would possibly, doubtfully, but, say, well, we're gonna decrease. It's not something that we would do to them. Am I correct? This is
That is
something
correct.
that they're initiating as far as the cost.
Correct. And that may come into play, like if the recycling market were to improve and the Asian markets began buying and accepting items again, and it started becoming less cost prohibitive for cities, towns to be in it. They could come in and Republic could say, hey, it's great, it's making us money, and, we want to give a little break to your residents, and here's what we're proposing.
So to Robert's point, it wouldn't be us, initiating
Well,
a
to my
decrease.
point is basically, why is it the invisible taxpayer always on the hook to make up the differences between, contracts between, garbage or sewer or whatever, when they pay the salaries of the people who are employed by, in the city, and especially the people that are employed under contract. It's their money, and we as a city, we independent contract people out. Liz just talked about the contract for the landscaping. If that goes up, there's contingency in there. I mean, the taxpayer pays for that. So why is it that they're always the ones that get stuck holding the bag when things don't work out right?
Ask SRP.
That's my point. That's my point. If we have contract employees and we do things throughout the course of the year that we have to end up paying more for as the year goes by than we did the year before because of this index, then why, according to the way this thing is designed, why are we not taking that money that we would be losing on the increase and taking it out of things that are under contract through the salaries of some of the people that are under contract? That's basically my point. And it's not necessarily, it was just kind of a in jest point, because I was just curious to see what kind of answer I would have come up with when I asked that question. But it's just more like, at the end of the day, it's the people who are paying for these shortcomings if anything goes up. And the city does nothing but benefit. And if we have contract employees, I don't see why, if the city has to pay more for things, that we just take it more from the taxpayer when the public has people under contract.
But we're not paying this contract, Robert. We're
Well,
contracting
no, because if
only to have
every time we hire or rehire or renegotiate a contract and the price is more, that comes out of where?
The customer.
The consumer.
The customer,
Well,
the
okay,
same
let's
as
take
when they
the
raise
trash
their
out of it.
rates.
Let's take the landscape.
The same as when they raise their rates every year for your trash now. The customer pays for it. So you're comparing apples and oranges there. There is no comparison.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
So an AC unit that someone has to buy today, 5 years ago, could they have bought it cheaper? It's not the same price today as it was 5 years ago.
But they have a choice on what kind of AC unit they want to buy if you want to go down that road. But the point is that anything more we as a city and taxpayer have to pay for services that the city contracts out, it ultimately comes out of a general fund of what in the budget. And so if I took $10 out of that budget to get a tree trimmed last year, but I got to put $15 out of that budget to get a tree trimmed this year, now where's that $5 going? It's going to there. So now it's a shortcoming somewhere else. So now that's got to be made up somewhere else. So that's my point. It's like it's all just a wheel.
I think Stephen wants to answer.
Yeah, if I could respond to that, I think the piece that's missing in this is that the average rate was about 19 or 20 bucks per home, and then now it's going to drop down to $10.71. So even if you did get the maximum possible 5%, which by the way means the economy would be booming, right? Because that CPI metric is based on the economy. So at the end of year 10, if it's 5%, it'd be $16.61, which is still quite a bit less than what most residents are paying now. So just wanted to make sure that that was
the odds of a decrease are pretty darn slim.
So a decrease would happen if the economy did have a negative turn. So the odds of that happening right now, it's a pretty strong economy, right? So the odds of a negative decrease is pretty slim, yes.
And it's such a savings
as we all
right
know,
now.
that can change.
By entering into the contract, like you said, you're cutting most people's bills in half, and there's your savings, there's your
Phoenix,
decrease.
we just had that article, it's $26.41 a month, and they're going up.
To 33 a month.
Yeah.
Mesa pays $30 a month. We did share the historical 10-year CPIU data with you all and at the open house with the public there, showing that even applying the historical 10-year data, even in the 3 years that exceeded 5%, that in year 10, most residents would still be paying less then than they do today. So that was
Prices and costs, this is a contract, we went out to bid. You had the 3 biggest and largest companies bid on it. It is, in my opinion, what we just did with landscaping, what we do with a lot of different contracts, that is capitalism at its finest, when you got the ability to go bid in a private market, this opportunity here. This is the negotiation process that came up with the change in the cap. I think that was something you all wanted us to do, and then after 8 years, you go out and bid it again and see what the market is.
Just to clarify too, that language used to say the contractor shall increase the rates. So at council's request, we did add in contractor may increase or decrease. At the council's request, that was put in there, so.
May, shall, can, will, it's all the same.
Increase,
And
decrease.
we all agree that it won't be decreased.
It can, it doesn't lock them in, and the word may is better than the word shall as far as increase goes. They gave us a little bit of wiggle room. I don't know many things that, like Al said, cost less today than they did 5 years ago, but it's not Walmart either.
Milk and eggs are cheaper than they were 5 years ago. Anything else?
Excuse me,
Did you just gavel the meeting?
I guess I did.
All right, thank you, Chip.
Okay.
He really did.